1,600 feet of the ground, which is exactly what they do when they come in for a bombing run. So that night, they were pulling into this loop, like a big racetrack. And it stretches from almost up to, like almost to Lexington, I guess. And so they're coming through this loop just below the speed of sound, and they never really said what the accident was, but we surmised that when the plane is in a bomb run, it's the navigator is actually controlling the plane. Have you ever seen World War II movies? The bombardier's up there, and he's got that little stick going back and forth, and everybody else is just waiting for him to finish his job. So he's moving the plane left and right, and in the course of that, the plane automatically corrects. Well, we have gyroscopes in planes that keep them flying nice and level and smooth, and both of those gyroscopes failed. And so the plane inverted, the plane going over 600 miles an hour at about 1,400 feet, and there was no time to recover. So that night,
What do you just
9 children
twice these bombers?
and you can see it still touches today. Anyway, after this accident, it took about 3 days for them to identify my father's body and the navigator. The DSO, which is in the last position, he actually had the ability to adjust, but being upside down, that was fatal. So we waited for 3 days to find out the disposition of the accident. So about 3 or 4 months later, our family packed our things up and we moved to Florida. And I really thought that the accident was something that only we experienced. We had friends on base, they don't really know how to talk to you after something like that happens. And so they kind of stayed away. So my mother, in her infinite, good sense of humor, she's packed us up. She said, we're going to go to Florida. We're going to have an adventure. We're going to start a new life. And that's what we meant. Anyway, years passed, and I had seen an article in the Air and Space magazine called Speed Freak, about the B-58 cluster. And so I read the article, and at the end of it, there were some postings on the online, so I said, if anyone knows anything about this accident, contact me. So about 3 months later, I hear from a fellow by the name of Carl Colgan, who was a young boy, maybe 12 or 13 years old. He lived in the area. And he was emotionally touched by all this. He couldn't really explain to me what had happened or how all these things unfolded. And then I heard from Darrel Hovious. Darrel fortunately teaches at the university, or at the time taught at the University of Cincinnati. And so he wrote me a really good letter. And he explained to me how they were home watching television and they heard this enormous explosion. He said the sky lit up, and they thought, well, the gas man had gone, and let's go down and see what it looks like. And so families descended on this mountain, many of them children. We have Kim Porter here tonight. Kim was there, but the story goes is Kim was in a barber chair getting a haircut that night, and they got about halfway done. So he was kind of like this. And of course the barber stopped, and he wore that haircut how long? A week or so.
Dad finally figured it out.
A few days. So he was walking around half shorn. But in some ways, time stops in situations like that. So in the spring we came down and met a wonderful man by the name of Robert Sue. And I don't know if you know that gentleman, but that was his. Quite the man. And he treated us like family, pulled us in, took us to the crash site, and was very gracious. We picked up a few pieces of metal and went home. We drove down that We didn't even know the town of McKinney, I think, even existed on the other side. So for us, it seemed like, well, this is just pure rural area, and they're really not, we don't see any people, so we thought, well. But then Darrel shows up, and all of you people obviously have vivid memories of it. And that's the part that I didn't know at the time. So here we had this singular event where we all thought we had suffered, you know, as an Air Force family, not realizing really how we had touched the citizens of Lincoln County. And it started with Darrel, Alan Reed, who was a biologist, someone who was well known in the radio business around here, along with another fellow by the name of Chris Bennett, who was at the time in 2009 studying history. And they decided they were out here looking for the origins of the Green River, which apparently is nearby. And they went by the crash site because Alan had been there as a young man himself, and he couldn't understand why there wasn't some kind of marker by the side and all this other stuff. So Chris and Alan contacted me again through the Air Force magazine, or the Air and Space magazine. So now I've got friends who are looking around, and they decided that they would put a roadside marker up. And Chris called the Air Force, he called the state. So nobody was picking up the phone, nobody was helping with anything for something that was so long ago. And within a year, they had put together the application to the state. You raised $3,000 or $4,000 it would take to plant that. And they organized an event. Over 250 people show up. We have a tent, and I remember, I think the historian's name was Becky, who does these dedications and the unveilings, and she comes out here, she says, all my years I've never seen anything like this. He said, usually it's like 3 or 4 people, we take the tag off, and that's about it. Somebody takes a picture, but we had the paper guard there, they put flags a quarter of a mile down the road in each direction. Has a big tent and a major presentation, so it was an incredible understanding of how much this accident touched your community, your death. I want to thank you. It means a lot to me. So, that's my hat. Darrel, you're up. Oh, and before I forget, I'm also president of the B-58 Hustler Association, mostly because most of these people aren't around anymore. But I just finished up the association annual meeting, and I will be handing out honorary membership pins to everyone here in attendance tonight. So you'll have something to take home.
You got all
I'm sure several folks have memories of that particular night. You can share.
You look familiar.
And I was 14 in December of 1966. Actually, I just turned 14, and I was very fearful as a small child. A little personal disclosure here: in the late 50s, early 60s, I was terrified of nuclear obliteration. I watched a lot of science fiction. I watched Dr. Strangelove and Failsafe, movies from that era. And I used to climb into my little roll-away bed under my red quilt each evening and pray to God that there would never be a nuclear war. Quite often, late at night, I would hear boom. The B-58s were going over in the early 1960s, the circa 61 and beyond. Then there was the Cuban Missile Crisis, of course, in 1962. A gentleman down toward Mount Salem, Mr. Luke Dunn, built a fallout shelter under his home. I've got my fallout shelter booklet from that era as well, which I thumbed through. My parents were skeptics. They said, no, if there's a nuclear war, there's no point. It's over. But I was very afraid. Mr. Purdom at Houstonville School sent us down to the science room for a duck and cover session. We were told, again, as children, that the older upperclassmen would have the joy of going outside and shoveling dirt and books against the windows to protect us in case of nuclear attack. Of course, my chief question, how am I going to get home in time to watch Zorro at 3 in the afternoon? But, and I remember as well, my nephews and I in the early 60s, the big B-52 bombers, that glorious giant craft, were so low they would come over the farm. I lived at 2240 Mount Salem Road, and we would actually wave. I don't know if they could see us, but I was very aware of the stakes at that time, but not so much as that night in December of 1966. I should have been doing my homework that Monday night. For Ms. Annie West or Mr. Hanson Roberts, I had assignments, but I was watching The Big Valley on Channel 27, the BYT at that time. And it was about 10 minutes after 8. I remember the episode with Colleen Dewhurst and Barbara Stanwyck, and the Barkley women were being kidnapped in that particular episode. And I was really engaged in the episode when suddenly the power went off. And I looked to the left and the sky was red, and I heard what sounded briefly like a jet engine. And then there was a boom. The house shook at that time. I leapt off the sofa, went to the window by the fireplace and looked southeast. And saw it looked like a Christmas tree. There were pieces of material. Evidently the craft had hit the earth and had blown material into the air. And it looked like Christmas lights or a Christmas tree. Power came back on. And I talked with my good friend Sheila Mullins about this. I wonder about the psychology of the time. I don't know if I would do this today or if many people would. We rushed over there. We got in our old red Rambler station wagon, 1963 model. Kenneth Lay was the gentleman who lived across the highway. He came and got in the vehicle with us, and we went toward Houstonville, took the short pike toward McKinney, and as we approached, of course, Wendell Smith, it was his property where the crash was, or at least he's the latter-day owner. And there were giant clots of earth on the highway. The fence had been blown forward, and there was this tremendous blaze up on the hill. Some people had already arrived. We went toward McKinney, turned around, and came back like we were going to get back toward Houstonville. We got out of the vehicle. Our vehicle, the Rambler station wagon. I helped my mother into the ditch, and we started to ascend the hill. There was debris everywhere. It looked like confetti. There was insulation, the kind of honeycomb insulation that was sprinkled about. There was the fire in the distance. There was the lurid, it was reflected on the trees in the distance. There was an extended parachute with a deceased pilot, I would assume Captain Lunt, who was in the ejection seat. It had never opened up. I tripped over the cables. There's pictures of it from that area. He was seated with his helmet, his right arm extended on a lever. I think it was Richard Smith from the area who had a fire extinguisher, and he'd been on fire to our arrival. He was deceased, of course. He had what appeared to be his visor on from his helmet. Rob and I have talked about this, and he thinks possibly it was just a burn, but it looked to me at the time like it was a portion of a visor. To the right, wheel configuration, tires, part of a wing, part of the tail, but behind me at that juncture, as I ascended the hill, huge crater, a lot of flame coming out of it, the smell of fuel. My dear precious mother was, I think, into Zazu pits. Anybody remember Zazu pits? Her tagline was, "Oh dear, oh dear." Well, my mother, when this began, thought it was the Soviets. They'd nuked us, and she was screaming that in the house, the Russians who bombed us. When we got there, she said, "We're probably all going to die from this, from the fumes, from maybe radiation." She thought perhaps there was a radioactive element there as well. We meandered through the tragic area, And more people were arriving, sirens were coming, and we were sort of like, okay, we can't do anything here. It's time to perhaps exit. And sirens were in the distance. We were there probably about half an hour, but it's such vivid images, of course, obviously would stick in your mind from that time. Later that evening, Channel 27 again showed a slide of B-58 Hustler in delayed views. I remember a few weeks ago, someone offered the trite statement, but I think it has validity, that heroes die with their boots on. And these three men certainly did. They died with their boots on to protect us. And as always, we're indebted to them and to the countless men and women in uniform, obviously, to protect us. But again, I think of those early days when I was so fearful as a child and would pray every night to Jesus, please, no nuclear wars. And again, I was reminded of the stakes with the aircraft that flew over daily. A lot of sonic booms back then, and I was reminded of the stakes that particular night. 2 days later, my father found a couple of pieces, several pieces of the plane, which a couple here. I'm giving to Rob. Looks like some kind of a fabric, maybe from a seat, I don't know, and then there's a piece of copper from the craft as well. It was obliteration. There are pieces in so many different areas. But 2 Air Force officers came to Houstonville School and asked us to recount if anybody had seen anything, and we did. There was an African-American gentleman who did farm labor in the Houstonville area. We called him Rock. Does anybody remember Rock from the Houstonville area? I've never learned his full name. I always just called him that, Rock. He was a very tough man, wonderful man, but he had seen, I think, the craft actually go over it. Again, it's hard to believe it's been 59 years, but I think it was 2009 that I emailed Rob, and we began a friendship, which I greatly value. And kind of in a nutshell, those are my chief memories of that particular night. Also, Zazu Pitts comes to mind. Any questions? Or anybody want to share your experience?
What's your mom, Helen?
No, Anna Hovious.
Anna.
Stanley and Anna, 2240 Mount Sale Road.
You know, one of the remarkable things about sort of the end of the story is there was one object out of that aircraft that was survived intact, and it was my father's wallet. We actually found it next to the defense systems operator, Darrel Hovious, thinking it was his wallet, but really was my father's. And inside, the only object that survived this crash was a picture of my mother, which was inside rubble. And that's something, it's a picture he took of her in high school, because they were high school sweethearts, and married right after he got his wings. And he kept that wallet that picture in his wallet through Korea, his flights around the world between the war, but all of those, TDYs and things he did would get forward, and he flew nuclear bombs from the get-go. When I grew up, it was all, astronauts and the guys that flew planes twice the speed of sound. So here he's living in the house, and if I wanted to see these planes, all I had to do was get on my bicycle and go down to the end of the street. And they were a remarkable bunch of men who flew these planes. They're crazy as could be. They're very, very challenging. And so if you've ever seen Failsafe or some of these other movies, you get some idea of what they did and what it was like to actually sit in a bunker waiting for the command to go, defend the country and then attack the Soviet Union. Go. So if you want to see any of that, if you ever have a chance to go up through central Indiana, the museum is right there, just a little bit north of Kokomo. And then there's a big display of all the stuff. A lot of my father's personal possessions that I gathered at the time are there. And in the end, a very good graphic designer friend of mine, Nick DeCarlos, and I put together a book. And we thought the people that came into the program were really kind of special. They started their careers at kind of the end of World War II, flying the first B-29, which was capable of delivering an atomic bomb, Enola Gay.
Steve,
And so my father went on to fly B-36s, which is the first intercontinental nuclear-capable bomber. Came out with B-47s, and so he had about 8,000 flying hours before he ever got accepted into the program. And you were not selected. You were not volunteer. You had to be selected to fly these planes. And so there were about 100 of these guys at any given time, and they were considered to be the best of the best. Anyway, thank you all for being and listening to our story.
You may have told us, and maybe I missed it. How old were you when this happened?
I was 16.
6.
I don't think she was something up.
Did you get your father's parachute? The reason why I asked that you used to hang at the armory and then up in the ceiling. It was there for the whole time I was in.
Yeah, I heard about
And
that.
it disappeared.
They got rid of it, yeah.
That's the deal. There are 3 positions in this plane. Simply, the pilot is obviously, behind all glass. The navigator's in the 2nd position when this little window is. And the DSO's in the 3rd. So when they pop out, you go 1, 2, 3. The guy in the front can't go first. So the DSO is the guy that came out, and that would be the capsule that the DSO ejected in. This plane you couldn't bail out of. You had to have a special ejection capsule that clammed up and pumped you out. But in fact,
Stop.
I think Darrel have. I thought we had a picture of it up here. But if you've seen the picture of the capsule, you see the shrouds coming out. That was his ejection capsule.
That guy got his own hint.
But as far the question about the parachute, yeah, we heard about it, but it had disappeared before we ever got an opportunity to try to recover. I'm not sure it's something that I would have wanted necessarily, but I think this is what you're talking about. Okay? So what you're looking at the backside of the ejection capsule. Each crew member had one. And they clam up all at one time, and they go boom, boom, boom. Okay.
So did they think that maybe when he come out, the plane was inverted
It was already inverted.
and you hit,
Yeah, what happens when the gyroscopes fail, the plane doesn't know what's up or down anymore. And so it basically and because they were on a guidance system, the guidance system is trying to correct what it cannot correct. So the plane is flying itself into the ground, and there's just no time for the pilot to take control and correct any of that.
back at the time, some people talked about being on fire, go in land. Was there anything to that?
I've heard about that. Have you ever seen a B-58 take off at night? It's nothing but fire to the back. So if my father was trying to recover the plane, maybe retard the left engines and push the right to twist it back on its own, it would have shot an 8-foot flame out the back, no problem.
That's probably what for each one.
Yes. As far as we know, the plane did not break off in the air but possible theories, an engine loss, that would be one. We think the most likely that the gyroscopes, the guidance systems, this is a complicated aircraft and it's the first of its kind. So things went wrong. In the development, I think they lost 26 airframes. It was that out there.
You may have coached it. What Air Force base did you call it fly on?
It was called Bunker Hill Air Force Base at the time. Today it's Grissom Air Reserve Base. And then it's about 10 miles north of Kokomo, south Bend.
Would that have been the same base that the B-52s flew out of as well, that did those bombing?
The B-52s did not fly there. They would have been flown out of Louisiana, possibly anywhere along the East Coast. Another reason that they like to use your state as a bomb run is because it's centrally located. So bombers stationed in Texas and the Nebraska, anything along the East Coast would all have used this bomb run.
There was a fellow from Garrett County, he liked to tell a story. He had a series of a couple of silos, and those B-52s was using his silos as a target. He could see the doors open. Now, whether this guy exaggerated.
Let me tell you how it's electronic bombing. They're not opening doors and throwing out stuff. It's all electronic. So up in Richmond, there was a tracking station. There may still be there. And every time you came into this racetrack, it's the same course, whether you're flying B-52s or B-58s or B-47s. They all flew that same bomb course. Somebody asked me the other day, said, why do you have to have an accurate bombing with a nuclear bomb? It seems like you can just get it in the neighborhood. That would be enough. And he said, well, that's just not the point. The point is that if they wanted to target, it might be over here and here, and they would drop the bomb here, and 2 for 1. So looks like
Would the B-52s ever drop like tinsel?
they all have the ability to drop chaff. You mean here?
On our farm, years ago, they used to go up in a house, and one time there was like Christmas tinsel all over they dropped it.
Right, that's chaff.
That's
It looks like bubblegum wrapper. Tinfoil. It's all to clutter any radar signal. That's what make the screen go fuzzy, like the old days.
I thought we were very plain.
Yeah, and for the record, the B-58 set no less than 14 speed records. It won 6 trophies. In fact, it is still one of the fastest, even though it hasn't flown for many, many years. It's faster than the I think the only plane faster that it now, I believe, is the F-22, in the new F-16. Otherwise, it's still the fastest plane. And the reason is it just drank, you can imagine it drinking with fuel. So they have stories of these planes, and if you know anything about airplanes, what a 1-to-1 power to weight ratio means, it means that if you weigh 50,000 pounds and you have 50,000 pounds of thrust, you can go vertical. And they would do it all the time. So I have these stories of the guys sitting on the end of the runway, they'll run the engines up, brake release, and they'll get a few hundred yards down the runway, and then they'll just turn the nose straight up. And I think they could get to about 26,000 feet in less than a minute. So, without the pod underneath, without the bomb hanging on there, it was a plane you couldn't catch. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.